First of all, thank you so much for attending our event tonight with Belmont Books. We're an indie bookstore in the greater Boston area. And I also just like to say an extra thank you. We are still in a pandemic and many people are still working on their computers, going to school on their computers. So to do something social on your computer in the evening means a lot, and we really appreciate it, especially supporting these authors and an independent bookstore. If you haven't attended an event with us, I will just do some housekeeping stuff and then I will turn it over to Lone and Suzanne, and they will talk for around 40 to 50 minutes. I will probably pop back in quarter of to help moderate questions. So if you have questions for either Suzanne or Lone, if you look at the bottom of your screen, there are two speech bubbles that say Q&A, and you can just submit your questions there. It just makes it easier to see and pick out instead of missing it in the chat. So feel free to submit those there. We have an event tomorrow night with Nikisa Afia, who is talking about her debut historical mystery novel that is set during the Harlem Renaissance. So if you like historical mysteries and you've exhausted all of the popular ones, or you just want a break from the typical British London setting, that's going to be a good time. She's in conversation with Denny S. Bryce, who recently came out with Wild Women in the Blues, which is set in the 1920s. So that'll be interesting. And then I believe on Thursday, we have another event. Our events calendar has been pretty robust with the switch to virtual. That is a silver lining. So we have Mary Alice Monroe in conversation with Nancy Thayer. If you're a fan of beachy reads, that is definitely an event for you. And then next week, something that is kind of a big deal, we are participating in the In the Heights launch event with Lin-Manuel Miranda. So tickets are on sale. I believe the book purchase counts as your ticket, but we have partnered with a lot of other local independent bookstores like Harvard Bookstore and Porter Square. So that is going to be a very fun time, and I believe that's next Tuesday on the 15th. So we hope you'll join us for that. And now I will introduce our authors tonight. So our wonderful In Conversation partner, and we're such big fans at the store, and also Suzanne, I believe both of their books have been staff picks for us. So we are very excited to have this event. Lone Lee holds an MFA degree in fiction from Fairfield University, and it's also her undergraduate alma mater. She's a Pushcart Prize nominated writer, and her short stories have appeared in Craft Literary, Mud Season Review, and Angel City Review. Lone works in book publishing and lives in Manhattan. I escaped book publishing, so props to you for still sticking with it. I am a casualty of publishing.
Oh my God, so funny.
Ooh, we can talk about it.
I don't blame you
sometimes. A Faux Love Story is her first novel. We were talking before, and there's a companion on the way, so maybe she can tell us later more about that. And we are here to celebrate Suzanne Park's latest YA Sunny Song, Will Never Be Famous. Suzanne Park is a Korean-American writer who was born and raised in Tennessee. As a comedian, she was selected to appear on BET's Coming to the Stage. Suzanne was also the winner of the Seattle Sierra Mist Comedy Competition and was a semi-finalist in NBC's Stand Up for Diversity Showcase in San Francisco, which would explain why her books tend to have such a thread of humor to them. Suzanne graduated from Columbia University and received an MBA from UCLA. She currently resides in Los Angeles with her husband, female offspring, and a sneaky rat that creeps around on her back patio. In her spare time, she procrastinates, which I don't believe if you can look at the books behind her that she's written. Lone at First Sight was her first adult debut, and I know she has another one coming out in the next couple months, which I'm sure we will also hear about. Lone and Suzanne, over to you.
Thank you so much. Oh my gosh, there's so many great events too that's happening at the bookstore. So that's brilliant and really exciting to see. So apologies in advance to everyone here, because this whole session is basically me, a fangirl, having direct access to her like new favorite author. So like I'm taking full advantage of this. Suzanne, like we've, you know, DM'd and stuff, but I'm really such a huge fan of this novel. There's like really so many adjectives to describe this novel, like so many, but I would just say, you know, it could be summed up as delightful. Like it was truly a delight to read, this easy summary read. I have been following this like on social media too, because I've seen the NPR review, which was brilliant. And then I've seen a lot of people on Bookstagram, they posted your book and great headband, and they would, oh, I don't know how to do, but basically they would copy Sunny's look, and that it's such a brilliant, cute way to promote this book. And I believe there was one review that said something like, I think it was Sunny will easily endear herself to many readers. And I think that's what happened here when I was reading it. From like her really, really, really smart razor sharp humor to everything about that classic city girl going to the rural life trope. All of this was just brilliant. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for doing this conversation with me. I love this book. I love it.
Thank you so much. For anyone,
fangirl too.
Yeah, fangirls, just fangirls. For people who might have just joined, I was wondering if you can just, you know, talk about pitch your book in your own words for them.
Sure. Sunny's Song Will Never Be Famous is a young adult novel, and it's about a Korean American teenager who is a social media influencer based in Los Angeles. And due to some mishap, she is then sent by her parents to a digital detox farm camp in Iowa. And you get to follow her journey as she figures out is forced to unplug, but then has to figure out how to connect with people when she's forced to disconnect.
Wonderful. I love that. And it was also, it's not just a digital detox camp, but it was formerly a Christian camp too. So I thought that was a really funny detail. And I love the setting was also brilliant too. It was really funny. And I think it leads me to the next point that I wanted to make about the cover, because it does show that rural life. And for those who can't see, there's like this, it's a brilliant, like, oh, I'm not good with colors. Like pinkish, orangish color. What's the right word? Pink, salmon pink, maybe?
I think it's salmon, but it sounds weird to say salmon. So,
but it shows Sunny, and she's like crouched down and she's on her phone, and there's a chicken nearby. And I think this is one of the covers that like it's you can see it's so bright and sunny, no pun intended, but so, you know, bright, and then it just draws you in. So I know there's like a lot of covers, I think, get, you know, they don't get as much, cover artists at least don't get like as much credit. So I just wanted to shout out to Nicole Hauer, who worked on the design, and it was illustrated by Carolina Mellis. And it also made me wonder, was this like the first kind of cover you saw, or were there a couple of rounds? And how did you know this one was the one, quote unquote?
Sourcebooks Fire does really good covers, at least for contemporary, that I've seen. I've just never, I've just always been blown away by the artwork and the cover design. So so when they told me that they were working on this cover, while I was writing it, I was like, well, so they knew enough about the book to at least capture the essence of the book, and they knew what kind of books that I write. So I think they captured the humor right. Mm-hmm. And then I know the artist was the same one who did American Royals.
Oh, that's awesome.
Kind of look at the art, you can see it, right? Yeah. So I knew going into it that they had already planned a certain aesthetic, and they knew which artist they wanted. And what I cared most about, honestly, was the depiction of the main character, just to make sure that she looked like she was Korean American, especially if they were going to do a very like huge close up and focus on her versus the couple, or just farm life. Because when they said they were going to encompass farm life on the cover, I thought it was going to be, it could have been anything, right? Who knows? Yeah. So this was actually close to the first photo, or the first image that they sent. The main difference was the font was the first one. It was black and it was kind of in a more scrawled print. And then the background was actually more solid color, and she was a little bit more fancy looking. So I think the commentary I had was it worked within what the kind of feedback that authors can usually provide, which is like, I didn't actually say much about the font because I knew they were going to change it. But with her, I wanted her to look casual or comfortable, I should say, because she is going to be at a farm camp. So they were able to just, I think it was just her fingernails and something else that was a little bit more like a little bit made up or done up. The chicken was the same, and it was just worth it just for the chicken. There. Yeah, because as soon as I opened up the file, I was like, okay, this is already perfect, but...
And then the chicken makes a special appearance throughout the pages too, which I loved. So I adored that detail.
Right. And then the background, it was more solid color. And I said, well, if this is meant to be at a barn, which I think it was, because this is where she hides out trying to get cell reception. Can we make it look more like a barn? And they were able to add kind of the wood grain. I don't know if you can see it from here, but but the chicken, of course, stole the show. So I asked, well, can we maximize on the chicken? So I asked if they would be able to add the chicken on the chapter headings, and they did. And that
was one of my favorite things when I was flipping through. I was like, oh, there's chicken again.
There's chickens in every chapter. And I was like, hey, I was able to give some input, and it's absurd. They're probably like, why do we allow them to give any input? This is what she wanted.
It's so important. Yeah, especially like when you were saying about making sure the character looked like Korean American. It's like, that's like one of the essential parts of this story about the character Sunny. Yes. So Sunny, she's really just the star of the show. Like, I think when I hear digital influencer these days, I don't think I have a necessarily good thought about them, considering some scandals that are happening and stuff. But for her, she is so smart, basically. She's savvy. She knows what she's doing. And I think her parents don't really see that at first, because they think that she's not paying attention to what really kind of matters, which I kind of disagree with. I mean, she is sort of missing out on some things, but like the things that she knows, she's like focused on. And she's also, her comments are just so funny. She's really observant too. Like, she can see things that other people wouldn't. So I loved her, and I just wanted to hear from you as the author of your process of crafting Sunny, who is this like, she's just full of contradictions, which I think makes a great three-dimensional character.
Oh, thank you. The main thing I think going into developing Sunny was I had just seen the movie Clueless, and I don't see many.
Seen it?
What's that?
Just seen it?
Yeah. I had seen it before, but it's one of the few movies I've seen more than once. I usually watch a movie and then kind of say I liked it, but then never rewatch it. But Clueless is one I've watched maybe 2 or 3 times.
Okay, all right, okay.
Yeah. And so I came back to it because I had seen some other rom-coms that sort of hadn't aged well. And I was kind of curious if this movie would still be relevant or even interesting or funny. And it was just as delightful like the second or the third time that I had seen it. But when I was watching it, I was really kind of taking notice of Cher as a character, how she was, obviously clueless, but she was also savvy in her own way, yet naive in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
She was likable, believable, but there was just a lot of contradictions within her character. But in the end, the whole essence of Cher made sense. And I think when I developed Sunny's character, I wanted something similar, where she was this LA teen influencer, and at first glance you would make judgments just based on that, and in the
label,
that does happen, and then she will throughout the book prove you wrong. And I really wanted to showcase that, because I think that is sometimes how different generations see other generations. They kind of look at them and say like, oh, you're like this, and it's like this huge stereotype. And I wanted to turn that upside down and say like, you know, there are people who will surprise you, and Sunny is one of them.
Yes, that's a great way to. She is a total, like, complete surprise. And what you said about generations, that's so true, because throughout the book, it's like, sure, like this is a detox camp for like young digital influencers, but there's also characters that are, you know, older, and I adored those interactions too, because you're right, like we're often like quick to judge generations, like we have that kind of, you know, Gen Z is so this and that, or like Gen Y is the better, I don't know, like just really just superficial things.
Yes.
So that's a part of the book that I also enjoyed, how you gave space to kind of confront a lot of like the misunderstandings, miscommunications, and you do that in a beautiful way. It really just worked. So I think Sunny is, like I said, she's my favorite character, of course, but you also did a fantastic job with side characters. I mean, you meet one of them right away, so I'm not really spoiling anything, but Maya is, you know, Sunny's best friend, and also her quote unquote admin while Sunny is away at detox camp. But they're so in sync together, and like Maya doesn't appear on page technically until like only she appears maybe, her appearance is like brief and stuff, but her impact is felt throughout, I think. Mm-hmm. So not only Maya, but there's other side characters that I completely adored. So how did you do it? How did you make sure to like, did they come into the story as you were writing, or did you have them from the very beginning at the get-go?
I am a terrible person at plotting and outlining ahead of time. So this book, I knew the direction it was going to go in, but I didn't know all of the characters that would go into it. I knew she would have a best friend that was sort of the operations mastermind.
Completely operations mastermind, yeah.
Yeah. And I chose she was at a smaller, like a prep school. So I wanted to make sure that, you know, it wasn't this like, she had, how do you put it? Like, people that were so vastly different than her, because when you end up at like a smaller school, or like you have your group of friends, you just have this chemistry with your best friend or your core group of friends, that whether you finish each other's sentences or you share a lot of you have similar interests or whatever it is, there's something that bonds you together. And I felt like with her and Maya, it's kind of patterned off of, my daughter has school friends that she's grown up with since kindergarten, and she is now 11. And they just are so in sync. They can just sit there and not really speak, but they're totally connecting somehow. Like,
yeah.
There's just something about them. And I wanted to see if I could capture that essence of like friendship, where you don't have to be talking all the time or texting all the time. You know, you have each other's back. And when you're reading the story, you know that Maya completely has her back, and she's not this ingrateful. You don't read the book hopefully and say, oh, Sunny's just like all take. You can tell that they have this friendship, and it's just Sunny's turn to, you know, have this weird experience away, and Maya's just going to hold down the fort, because that's like how their friendship works. And I just thought it was nice to have her have somebody that is her foundation and her rock, while everything else is in disarray. So that's how I developed Maya.
Theo.
What's that? Oh, Theo.
I love that name too. I love Theo.
Yes. You'll see why I named him Theo, but in the book. But at the camp, I wanted to make sure.
Not for the reason that most people might think.
Right. Not a normally chosen name by any real reason, but so Theo was one that I knew I wanted definitely this LA big time character to deal with somebody that's a small town just run into somebody like that and then kind of see how they interact. So I wanted her also to have this thing where they kind of judge each other too, where they have assumptions about each other and they're not correct. And with Theo, poor Theo in some ways, where he has this brother that overshadows him. He's the older brother, and you can get from the get-go how his brother just has presence. He commands the room. He's taller. he's broader. He's that guy, right? And Theo's just in his shadow, but he's not trying to always be like him. He is his own person and very confident, but again, he's just overshadowed by the brother. But Sunny sees him as he is, and I wanted them to have a relationship where she wasn't all into the older brother because Theo's more her type. And I think that happens a lot in the real world, where you have guys or women or whoever that are in the spotlight are just very like the ones that everybody has crushes on. Yeah, and just everybody admires. And there's the quieter people in the shadows, and they're not as loud or as out there, but she sees him for who he really is. And I liked that bond that they had, where he's trying to teach her things around the farm and she has to figure it out, from archery to him suggesting different activities and telling her like the ins and outs of like, here's what you do to get free bread or whatever. And she's like, okay. And so they just have a nice relationship at the start, and it grows from there.
I love everything you just said about like they see each other, and I think the conversations they have are just because they're so opposites, it's just, you find something new within their conversations. They're learning something about each other every single time. It's a great source of tension. And I was actually reminded of Princess Diaries, because of the archery scene, which is actually one of my favorite scenes, because it's that first kind of like real, interaction between the two of them. And of course, Sunny's checking Theo out. So that was like, that was really funny to see. But I think that, those scenes that you did with Theo, every time Theo and Sunny appeared on stage, I just knew that we were going to get like a conversation that just really grows both of the characters. So that's like, I think that's also, why you were so successful in writing the side characters, because the side characters, they were also growing too. Like, it's not, I think that's one of the key things about writing is like side characters need to feel as if they're not just there for one purpose. And Theo, Maya, that certainly was the way. And of course, there's like plenty of other side characters, especially not just teens, but also like the coach. There's one character. I mean, the coach is that person of like leading the workshops for all these digital influencers, and there's some funny moments too with the coach. So great job with that.
Thank you.
Let's see. So another thing that I also loved was the family. So the reason why, we learned this from the beginning, the reason why Sunny has to go to this detox camp is that, well, there was an event called #BrownieGate, and you'll read about that, but it's because the parents, they put Sunny into this camp, and they're off screen, but they feel still very present. And what I appreciate is that you didn't, villainize them. I know it's not like an easy idea of like these parents sending their kid to camp, but you did it in a way where, Sunny was still writing to her parents for food for food and snacks. What went into, like, what was the process like of creating Sunny's family and like including them into the story in the story without having to see them? Like, they were just off screen, but they were still there.
I didn't want to artificially put them in ways that were unrealistic for camp. So you'll see that in a lot of things you have, like when a story like this, where it's not centered at home and it's like away, it's sometimes hard to figure out how to bring in family And especially in her particular family, it being both kind of a her mom having certain expectations of her, both academically and just socially, just with social media. She has that family and those expectations to deal with throughout the book, so I couldn't leave them out completely because they are part of her growth as like her arc as well. And so it was trying to figure out how to include them but not put them in so artificially that it didn't feel like a true summer experience, where when you're a teenager and you're away, you're not like, okay, you have it's not like you have lunch and dinner with your parents, and that's, or maybe you do in some camps, but not the kind of camp that's like on a farm.
And then also at the camp they can't have phones. Well, technically they can't have phones. So
she does carry into the camp though, sort of her
burner
feelings and her in a burner phone. And then but like she has to, for her to grow, she also has to be okay with realizing that like maybe she doesn't want to go to college, and maybe social media isn't what she thought. Maybe her parents were right to some degree, but again, she had to do that without the ever-present parents and family to kind of ram it down her throat or anything. If she needed to go on the self-discovery journey on her own. So I wanted it to be a camp. I did think about like maybe they'd do a cameo or a pop in, or maybe Chloe would get sent to the camp, but I didn't want it to be like, then I think it would just add too much complication because it was Sunny's story. But then I thought, because of the fact that she had to write as part of her journaling and her downtime, that it would make sense for them to write each other. And that's also one part of camp that's kind of like actually kind of funny and fun, is like writing a postcard, and like the idea that it gets sent off snail mail and then some mail gets back and you get really excited about like things like care packages when you're away. So those are things that are very offline that are still very relevant to today.
Precious.
Like, and those moments are important. But I would love to hear from you too. Like, you definitely have familial expectations as part of your story. So how did you know how much to include and then what to not include, and what was hard to write about that? I distinctly remember that engineering scene and being like, or her talking to the engineer.
So for people who are unfamiliar, so for a love story, like it was from two characters' perspectives. So Lynn, who's this really wonderful, spirited artist, her family kind of doesn't see art as anything like a career, which is completely wrong. But the family kind of wants her to go into something more steady. They initially wanted her to go into engineering. And I think that was just it's something that I have heard said to me, but wasn't complete. In my parents' defense, it wasn't like enforced, but it's been heard in my family of like, there are stuff that you can do for fun, but then there's stuff that you really need to just support yourself so that you can have fun, like they think about that first, of like, you can have fun, but you need something first. So I think I just put in the book because I was just surrounded by it. Like I just understood it immediately. And it's something that I feel like for like a lot of my Vietnamese American friends, or friends who are from parents or have family who are immigrants, who have literally like done everything to kind of support the kid. Like, I think that was something typical. So it was just an experience that just felt natural. But I think ultimately that book was, and also what with your novel, you prove is that like, there is an opportunity, or there's like, you can change people's minds. And I think that's something that happens in my novel, and then yours especially. There was this line about the parents being Team Sunny, and I was just like, yes, like the journey might have been different and a little difficult, but like in the end, the expectations that they have and the worries they have are because of this, love for their daughter. it's just the way that we perceive it that's different. So, but yeah, so family is like, I mean, I adored that part of your book, and I love Chloe too. I was like, Chloe should be like, you know how like the adaptation of Jenny Han's novel, how the little sister, she's getting her spin-off, I think. So
oh really?
I think I think the little sister or the actor, I don't know, maybe not, maybe there is some sort of spin-off that I heard about. But I was just like, Chloe might get her own book soon. I don't know. So the next question I had was, obviously like the digital space and social media was huge in this novel. And I felt like, as someone who grew up with the internet, like I understood some things like live streams and mukbangs, but I feel like I was also behind the scenes of all this, of like how hard it is, how people are preoccupied with like those view counts, subscriber counts, etc. So it seems like you have like this like really deep knowledge of social media and the digital space. And so I was just wondering if that just stemmed from your fascination, from personal experience. As you were writing this, did you have to like, I don't know, look at profiles of digital influencers or something?
I mean, a lot of that. It's kind of a mix of everything. Ironically, So We Meet Again also has a digital component too, where she is trying to launch a YouTube cooking show, Korean cooking show. And so some of the research I was doing is sort of for both. But honestly, the funniest thing about this story was I had this competition in mind, this like social media competition, but it was my editor that's like, have you considered using doing it as like an influencer house? And I was like, yeah, I was. Let me look into that. What is an influencer house? So it was my editor actually who was really interested in it. And then the funniest part about the whole influencer house, including it in the book, was, first of all, it was sort of just like it was a thing right before the pandemic. So, and then we were like, what if it, like, the pandemic destroys everything about influencer houses? So when the book comes out, it's like, first of all, a lot of people haven't heard of it. And then like all of a sudden nobody's heard of it because they're all gone. And then what will happen? But luckily, we kept our eye on it. And those are still in existence. Although some of them there's a lot of drama around them too. Like they blow up and they tear apart, Real Housewife style. So it's been interesting to follow some of these. I really started researching influencer culture and then ended up on, I get like newsletters and things about like sort of like trends. And I've always been interested in technology, but I mean, now it's like maybe too much. So there was research that definitely went into it, but ironically, the influencer house specifically was through my editor. And then I started questioning, like, what do you know about this? And how did you even come across this? But
editors just have so much knowledge,
it's true.
Random knowledge, and they can just help you in that way.
But it fit perfectly within the story, and the type of hype around it was really, really great. And then when I was researching influencer houses and then the scandal within, I mean, there's ones that are popping up, and then there's drama, there's interdating. They when they decide one person leaves, and it's a question whether the house can stay and survive, or the solo person who's going on their own as an entrepreneur, like to do entrepreneurial things, to start their own brand, almost like that becomes a question. And then it's amazing. It's and again, I don't know if we were worried that there would be some tapering or drop off of these types of places, but it seems to be at least relevant still today.
Oh yeah. I think in some ways I feel like it flourished because people were more because they couldn't connect with people in real life, like they were living online, they were just seeing it, and it was a source of entertainment, I think, to some viewers. For me, it was almost like was a horror show to just watch some things that are happening in that space. But let's see. So I wanted to make sure that I was getting through all the questions. But one of the things that I thought I saw when I was researching, because this was like my first entry point to I think your career. Mm-hmm. So I'm very excited for your next books, and also your backlist. But you did an interesting thing where you're using settings that you don't think of when you're reading books. You're like, oh, I never thought of a book that would be set in the escape room, zombie themed escape room, or like your adult one. I think it was Loathe at First Sight, that was set in the video game industry. Mm-hmm. So, how did you end up, choosing these really cool settings?
Oh, I have come up with most of them just because they're sort of these nerdy, interesting things that I find interesting enough to research and write a book about. Like there's, and usually it's why I am interested is because it hasn't been written about, or at least not in the contemporary space. Like you might see the escape room idea concept. It definitely shows up in mysteries and thrillers. Yeah. And actually I love reading mysteries and thrillers. So that's been kind of a, maybe that's part of it. Video game industry also, like you see it in other types of books, but not in like women's fiction or in the romance genre. And it's usually sparked by an idea. Like the escape room book, I had just finished a zombie escape room and failed miserably. It was like an embarrassment of like us losing and losing fast. And the guy was like, I've never seen anybody perform this poorly. I'll be perfectly honest. Like he was totally frank with us. And then I remember thinking, well, this would be a funny place for two people to meet. Then the digital detox camp came from me just different ideas based on things that I was kind of already thinking about or researching. So the idea of just having to digital detox came from me going to a restaurant, and it was like a nicer restaurant where they played like classical music and you could hear clinking of silverware on nice plates. Mm-hmm. And there were everybody there, every single person from little like to toddler age all the way up to elderly, they all were on their phones or had their phones next to them.
And I can easily see that. Yeah.
I was like, what's happened in society where at a restaurant where you're dining with your family, arguably everybody's here to celebrate something, and this is like the norm. I didn't know what point society had finally gone overboard like that. So that was always in the back of my mind. But when I was doing research for Loathe at First Sight, I was looking up, just hardcore gamers and, how they kind of handle that obsession, and came across the concept of digital detox camps where their parents would send these young teenagers to young adult, like in their college ages, to it was in Korea and China and Japan.
Whoa.
That I was reading this about.
Oh, I didn't know they were real.
They're real in these extreme situations of specifically addiction online. And of course that made me think, like, do they even have anything like that here? And I couldn't find anything of that nature here, where they're literally getting shipped off and unplugged and all that stuff for the purpose of digital detox, except for adults. And it was just usually like a weekend retreat. And
it's probably like the adults wanting to do that, like
and they're like, I want to do yoga instead and meditate. And so it was definitely a different focus. But then I thought, like, where could I do a digital detox camp where it would be believable that they wouldn't have cell phone experience reception and all this stuff? And I was like, oh, I know what I would do, and I would have fun doing it, would be on a farm. And that took me in a whole different research direction, but I just had a really great time with that research. So it really came down to finding like an inspiring environment, and then making sure it was ripe for comedy. That's the other thing, is like, if there's the ways to just make the concept funny. There's definitely, you know, scenes within that you can make like hilarious. So that was my goal, was to find an absurd setting and then just make every little thing about it be more absurd.
Yeah. LA girl turned like sort of farm life girl. Like that's it was perfect.
it was good because she was totally a fish out of water.
Yeah.
But and then kind of related to that, I want to know about how in your book you have the restaurant settings, but how did you know like how much environment to bring in that was, you know, family business based, but also like how to kind of balance the culture of like the food, the language, the culture itself, the Vietnamese culture. How did you know what to incorporate, and then what was important to you to have at the final product?
Yeah. I mean, I think I always, again, it's one of those things that it was so ingrained in me that to not put into story was almost like I don't have a other point of reference. Like it just, like I didn't grow up in the restaurant business or necessarily a Vietnamese American dominated community, which is what happens in A Pho Love Story. But I had a family that was big and it felt like a village itself, you know, like I felt as if everywhere I went, they knew what was happening. They were talking amongst each other. Gossip it's still to this day easy to go like flow through our family channels. Like one person knows this, a text here, a phone call here, everyone else knows. And then just hop states in countries too, because we're all scattered. So something from personal experience that I wanted to incorporate that sense of community and how sometimes those characters can feel sometimes small within these communities, but also feel very safe and just safe basically. And for the food, like another thing is from my life that is, again, not restaurant business, but something that like I was just force fed my whole entire life with.
Wanted to be force fed when I was reading your book. I have to say, I was like, oh,
I'm very glad. I'm glad to hear that. To support small businesses, support their local restaurants or something. But yeah, it was just a fun element of it's part of the culture to not include it in some of my works. It's like a piece of me is missing almost, you know? Mm-hmm. So I love that question. Thank you very much. Let's see. I think about, let's see, are we doing good on time actually?
Thanks. If anybody has any questions, feel free to shoot them in the comments or
questions. Or else I also have like plenty of questions about Suzanne. So okay, I'll ask my next question of, since this is your third published book, and then you have another one coming out, and then you have another one coming out after that. Well, actually, you mentioned before our call, you mentioned a holiday rom-com too, right? So you have basically many books. So this being your third, though, what kind of growth have you seen in yourself as a writer? Are there lessons that you learned from the first book, and then the previous book, or even this book that you hope to sort of improve on for the next book?
Yeah, well, one of the things that I find important for me is to make sure that when people are reading my books, not all the main characters who are Korean American feel the same and are the same. And I think one thing that really helped with that is when I was writing Sunny Song and So We Meet Again, it was during the pandemic that I had to write these books, and they were on contract and due. And I wanted them, because of how things were at the time, to be comfort reads. So some of the planning of like what I was going to have kind of going in, again, my two previous books had a lot more snark and a lot more edge to the humor. Mm-hmm. I dialed that back into, or I moved, kind of like changed that focus a little bit. So it's more a feel-good kind of book, both of these coming out this year. Because that's what I needed as an author to write. And then I also wanted the reader to you know, because I didn't know what state of the world we'd be in right now. It's looking good. A lot better. I just wanted whoever's reading it to feel like this was like a nice warm hug of a book, and, you know, make them laugh and it be entertained. So some of the things that I kind of grew was kind of writing a little bit differently than I had been in the past. Again, my humor is usually more punchy and edgy, and, you know, it has a little bit more bite to it. And I had to write like the softer side of Susie and Lindy's. And it wasn't as hard as I thought it was, but it was definitely a challenge because I'd never done that before. So I don't know what my next books will be like in terms of like, you know, whether it be a blend or something different altogether. But there's definitely, you won't read these books and say like, oh, all these characters are kind of like exactly the same. You would definitely read them and say like, oh, I definitely see how this character is different because they have different motivations and they have different personalities and different inner voice and different ways of, you know, conversing with other people. The other thing I learned is that I was more disciplined than I thought. Because
that's good to hear. Yeah.
So that's one thing I've learned. I guess that's a good thing, but you know, you don't really know until baptism by fire in some of these cases, and this is one of them. But again, it was it's something that worked for me, which was keeping a word count goal per day. And then when I didn't hit it, I didn't beat myself up for it. And then when I was really in crunch time, I just kind of started ramping up the word count in these sizable chunks that were very doable, and was able to finally get to finish what I was trying to do. But it was, again, not something I had set out to do last year, but it just kind of it worked out.
Yeah. So you're more of like a plotter then, or basically kind of
like let me have a loose idea of what the story to go. I have my milestones. Like I know the beginning scene, I know the inciting incident. Yes, I know what in the middle needs to not make it muddy because I need to make something interesting. And then I figure out the climax and then the point of like despair and then how it's supposed to end. I have most of that figured out. I'd say like 75% of that figured out, but the rest is sort of just experimenting as I write.
Yeah.
What about
you?
I
would say like, I think I'm kind of similar in that way where I always call it like a written in sand outline where I'd probably will write about the big moments, like you said, those inciting moments. But then I wouldn't feel tied to it exactly. I wouldn't feel like, oh, I can't believe I changed this and that. Like I would just change it. Then I go, and then that might not serve me well because then it's like, oh, I changed this big plot point. So that means I have to like make sure everything else leading up to it works out. But I've heard just so throughout this whole, you know, debuting and just working more in the YA space of hearing people and how they write their stories. Like it's really fascinating. Like there's some people who like literally, I was on a panel and someone like wrote like maybe 50 plus pages of a synopsis / outline. So
one of my good friends does that. She writes like a 20-page synopsis minimum to be able to start. And I can't even write 20 pages of anything in one sitting, and you know, just a coherent thing. So it's amazing when people are able to focus like that. And then she says that the drafting part's easy as a result.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
because you basically have the words, like you know what, you know, the basic structure, I think.
So this is actually a perfect segue to Jessica's question, who wants to know from both of you, what made you, or when did you decide to become a writer? What advice do you have for a 15-year-old considering it?
I took a very windy path to becoming a writer / author. So I am proof that you don't really know or necessarily need to know, like in, you know, grade school, middle school, high school, what you want to do. And I definitely changed careers later on, and was able to still have a second career after like my regular career, like my normal career. So I ended up doing a lot. So I knew I wanted to be a humor writer. And then I ended up doing 10 years of stand-up comedy, straying off what I thought writing was supposed to be and then where I am now. So I would say I don't recommend that. Maybe shorten it if you do want to do stand-up as a path to doing novel writing, but it has nothing to do with it. And I don't know how I ended up there, but I did it. I found it rewarding. I don't regret having done it, but I ended up with just writing a novel and really just putting in the work, making sure I I didn't actually even know what I was doing when I was writing. So I was able to work with a mentor and get it shaped up, shapen up. I don't know the right words for that. And then really try to pursue traditional publication. And I took like all these steps to do it. And I, eventually ended up in the right place. So not a direct path. It definitely wasn't linear, but I definitely got here eventually just by trying to figure it out. And I stuck to that.
Yeah, you're here. Like everything that you did was just like, yeah. I feel like your comedy, even like that just helped so much too. Like that experience of doing stand up for a while, like that works into the novel, and your work in general, actually. But for me, like I think I didn't really always see myself as a writer because I had two issues of like, first of all, like my English was, I'm a book editor now, so it's really weird to think about the fact that I hated writing. I was not good at it because English was technically my second language. I was speaking Vietnamese first, so I had to go to like English as a second language class. I hated grammar. I was so embarrassed by all the mistakes I would make. So it was that. And then I also had I was an extremely shy kid. And in some ways I'm still that shy kid inside. So I was kind of holding myself back a lot of times of like, I didn't think I was good enough. I didn't trust myself. I thought everything that I contributed to writing and stuff, I didn't feel as if I didn't believe in it really. So I think my journey was more of like, it was just more of a confidence issue that I just built over as I grew older. My confidence kind of grew as well. And I had great mentors too. Like I had to believe in myself first. Obviously, that was something that it starts with you. You can't really get validation from anyone else but yourself, I think, as a writer and even as a person in general. So that came in, and then I had mentors who, they paid attention to, to what I was doing. It felt genuine too. And so they were able to help me along the way too, as a writer. And then, initially it was more of like, wanting to help other writers as an editor. Editing is still very much my career. It's my day job of editing. So I love that aspect, but to be on the other side, to meet so many great writers, and Suzanne, for example, is one of them. Like, we are in a special field, I think, and I will never take that for granted. And it's something, Jessica, I think that was the person who asked the question of like, you have you're 15, I think, so you have so many years ahead of you, and it's going to be beautiful if you really truly believe in yourself and believe in your work. I really think I support writers. I hope anyone who wants to be a writer will become a writer. So,
Lone, were you you mentioned kind of like your confidence from high school. I didn't do well in my English classes, in that I just assumed being good in English classes meant you could be a writer. Like I thought that was a rite of passage. And so I was like, well, that career's out the window. Like,
yeah,
right. I just assumed like, oh,
I know.
Be an English major, or you have to have gotten a 5 on your APs, whatever it was just like this barrier. And because I didn't even get close to it, I just assumed it was just a prerequisite.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to also add that that's not actually a prerequisite. In case anybody thinks it is, it's not.
No, yeah. Not at all. Like who remembers what they got on their APs anymore? Like, and also, and it's also like finding your type of writing. Like many people will say, oh, literary writing is you know, better than this and that, or like something. It's more of just like finding that, yeah, that type of writing that you just adore and love. I mean, I was not good at essays. Essays were just, for me, I couldn't find myself within essays. But once I started writing, like, you know, short poems and like short personal essays, that's when I was just like, oh, so this is writing. Mm-hmm. So yeah, just, you know, find your area of writing that you love. It's writing, period.
So I have a couple like fun questions that I thought of while you two were talking. I'm very curious if either of you think you could handle a digital detox camp.
How long?
Yeah, I know that.
Because I kind of did one for a week as like a test. And it went over reasonably well. But like I had to have rules. That's what it turned out, because I couldn't decouple from email because I was still like on deadline and I needed to like know what was going on in like that and marketing. Yeah. But I was able to do social media and certain things that were just kind of digitally focused, but not necessarily like all off, going completely offline. And that was a week and it was hard. It was easier though as time went on. The first day was hard. Day 2 was like, okay, I can do this. But day 3 onward, I was like, okay,
I feel like once you get in the habit of like not checking Twitter when you wake up or Instagram, like you want to look at it less and less.
Yeah. Oh man, a week. I don't know if I can do a week. I think the only way for me to do a detox is probably if like the battery runs out and I don't have any way to charge it. It's so bad that I like automatically reach for my phone nowadays. And it's not just my phone, but just the screen too, because I write most on the laptop. So I don't know. I would probably be so horrible. I would resort to what Sunny did of like bringing in an illegal phone, you know, like that was smart of her. So
I did realize how much news I consume either through social media or just kind of like poking around, and that was nice to not do during that time, because it just was, I didn't realize how kind of attached I was to like knowing what was going on in the world and, you know, the latest numbers and whatever. It was like, oh, that's good to not have to think about that all like a lot. And it just made everything just kind of slowed down and calmed down a bit during that week.
Mm-hmm. And then the other question I had was, if you were any kind of social media influencer, whether it was like a mukbanger or like a Twitch streamer or like a food blogger who takes really crafted photos for your Instagram, which influencer what kind of influencer do you think you would be? What appeals to you the most?
That's a great question.
So We Meet Again is about a investment banker who gets laid off on Zoom. And then she decides to move back home with her parents and then start up this Korean cooking show where she does food hacks, taking meal kits that she gets and then makes them and Koreanizes them. I think that whole idea, as I was writing, I was like, this is sort of how I do. That's how I cook. I just take leftovers or things that could be spruced up and I just hack them, or I take something that's instant and then I try to add things to make them healthier. So I think that's just like how my brain likes to do shortcuts and make things. They never look good. And I guess that's the problem with being like they look terrible. Everything's like brown.
Or they taste good. They taste great.
But it tastes really good. But it's hard to convey that when everything's just like brown mush. And it's like, no, I promise noodle dish is excellent.
Do not feel bad, because I remember when Martha Stewart first joined Instagram, her food photos were so bad. So the lighting was bad. Everything was beige. So like, don't worry about it.
That's me. That I would be the beige cooker.
Yeah.
You know,
shades of
live streamer. Like I would just come up with all beige foods, homemade foods that taste good but look terrible, and that would probably be my shtick.
But Suzanne, so your thing, if you ever choose to pursue it, could be Suzanne's snack hacks.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I would watch it. I'd be your first subscriber, follower, etc.
I'd have Martha Stewart come on.
Yeah. So I would be probably I know nothing about coffee. I like to just consume it. Like I don't know how to taste it very well. So maybe I wouldn't be an exact expert, but I have been obsessed with coffee influencers where they do, their own, they would make these elaborate lattes or cappuccinos, and those just look delicious. So I would probably do that.
Are you are you on TikTok at all?
I am.
Okay.
And I think that's my my entry point. And then I migrated to following mostly on Instagram, but that was why, like, they would pair up. It's so, oh my God, mesmerizing of like, they pair up these really nice, slow music, so calming, right? And then you hear the glass, you hear the ice dropping into the glass, the syrup going around the edges. It's really an art form, I think.
One of my favorite discoveries on TikTok is this man who reviews iced coffee videos.
Yeah, Starbucks, Dunkin' Donuts, right? And then people pay him now to do.
I don't know do they pay him? Good for him. But he's like a Canadian man named Ty Bridgewater. And he's like, all right, he's like sits in his hammock in his backyard and reviews.
Oh, wrong person. Okay. Yeah.
And the funny thing about it is like he will just get distracted by like, oh, like what color is that wall paint? Like, what would you call it? Is it like a spruce or is it like a heather green? Like, totally starts ignoring the coffee. And then he'll like rate it at the end, like 9 out of 10.
I love it.
But I've become obsessed with.
I was thinking of another person who, so it was not Ty, but it's another person who, like, he goes to Dunkin' Donuts or Starbucks or something, and he orders drinks, and he gives like the price and stuff, and then he gives the alternative kind of hack, I think, so that's cheaper, so the drinks are cheaper.
Yeah.
So that's really helpful. And then he also, I guess people are sending him money now to do that, to purchase coffee and make them. Yeah. So he's living the life.
And I feel like Suzanne, a cooking show is not out of the realm of possibility. I don't know if either of you read Alicia Rye's romances, but during quarantine, she started her own YouTube cooking channel, and it's a delight.
Oh, I didn't know about that. Oh,
yes. I think it's like cooking in quarantine, but yeah, she started her own.
And then she always shows what she's bought at Trader Joe's, and I'm always like, I want to know what she bought. And then I bought things because of what she purchases, and you hear, she rips open the package and she chews it, and you're just like, oh, that
sometimes her mom joins her for cooking.
Oh, that's so
nice. Cute. So I highly recommend it. But those are the two kind of goofy questions I had. I don't think I could do a digital detox either, so don't feel bad. But thank you both so much for joining us. Congratulations on release week, Suzanne. I know you've been super busy. Thank you for celebrating Sunny Song with us. When is So We Meet Again out?
Oh, that comes out in August 3rd. So in less than 2 months. Oh my gosh.
Wow.
And Lone, any updates on your companion novel?
Yeah. Well, I don't know the date actually, but it's going to be announced soon, I think.
Okay.
So
like fall or like 2022?
It's probably 2023 actually.
Oh my God. Okay.
Wait,
we're already thinking 2020.
I hope no one eventually watches this and be like, what is she talking about? Yeah, I can't figure it out. It's coming out in the near future.
What is time, right?
What is time?
But thank you all so much for coming. If any of you joined late or halfway through, we are recording this, so it'll be up on the Belmont Books YouTube channel, usually within 24 to 48 hours, so you can kind of catch up on everything you missed. And yeah, once again, thank you to Lone and Suzanne for joining us tonight.
Of course, and congrats again, Suzanne. Your book was such a delight.
Thank you so much.
Buy us.
And then also buy
buy Lone's book too.
Look how pretty it is.
Woo! Cover high five, book high five.
Yeah, book high five.
Bye, everyone.
All right. Thank you.